Hello and welcome back to Vox Popcast, the weekly pseudo-academic roundtable of pop culture analysis with drinking and swearing. My name is Christopher Maverick, but you can call me Mav, and I am once again here with my co-host Katya and not palindrome, but birthday Hannah. Happy birthday, Hannah!
Thank you. I'm 30 now, ish.
Ish.
well, we're recording before my official birthday, so I guess when you're listening to this, I absolutely will be 30.
Okay. Maybe you weren't sure.
But actually, like, what are any of us at this age?
I feel like there's a really great, some sort of like aging Schrodinger's cat joke here, but I'm not smart enough to make it.
Still in COVID times, birthdays don't count. So
I am fully still 29, a full year later. I refuse to acknowledge that COVID birthdays are real. I will be having my 30th birthday in 2022 because my birthday in 2021 is going to once again be garbage.
Yep.
There's a very, very small possibility where I live currently. I might get a vaccine sometime in my birth month, which would be great. So, that's how we're doing.
So with all that cheery news, Hannah, it's your birthday. What are we doing to celebrate your birthday?
We're talking about Bridgerton again. And it's not just indulgence. Okay, I mean, it mostly is indulgence for me. But there's been quite a bit of season 2 news out since we recorded our first episode. So it's still current. It's not like we can talk about WandaVision.
It's also still,
spoilers.
Yeah, it's also still one of Netflix's top 10 shows and has been for the last 3 months. So, people are still watching it. It is still a good show. So last time we recorded a Bridgerton episode, which, time means nothing in COVID, like we said. I think it was 3 weeks ago. It could have been 3 years ago. I've really lost track. But we had a couple of guests, so we invited them back. So returning from the previous Bridgerton episode, we have Nicole and Sarah. Hey, guys.
Hey.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, there's not been new episodes, and it's your birthday, Hannah. And on last week's show, you made fun of me. You were like, "Oh, I've never messed up hosting." So as far as I'm concerned, Hannah's the host this week. So congratulations.
No, I'm not the host because I guess I'm as much the host as I am every show. What I meant is that I don't do the intro and outro, and you've already done that. So I guess my job is halfway done. So
you can do it now, and I can just splice the old one out and put the new one in. It's fine.
Good job. No, you just do it so well, Mav. It's fine. I'm sure that if someone heard my voice, they'd be like, "What's wrong? Where's Wayne? Where's Mav? Where's Katya? Where's literally anyone else who's ever introed the show?" So yeah, I guess we can get started by focusing on a very light but important topic, which is Prince Friedrich was done dirty, and I want everyone's thoughts on this because I actually think that he was a pretty nice guy. And I'm not saying that she should have married him. I'm just saying her life would have been a lot less dramatic and full of more stuff had she.
Sure. I guess I'm mostly curious. Okay, am I alone in thinking that Prince Friedrich is not that compelling of a character? Because I was just sort of you are pretty to look at and a great plot device. I didn't realize that there were Prince Friedrich stands.
I think that I'm alone in this, and I will tell you why I like him, but I'll let everybody else chime in.
First, I want to address the question of, you said, he's pretty. Is he even all
no,
he was not.
He's not ugly. No. He's fine. But, on a show.
He's pretty in the way that everyone on television is pretty.
Yeah. He is a above average looking man. He looks like every star on television, like you said. And on a show where you literally get to see Simon, naked a lot. I'm like, oh, yeah, he was there, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He was not meant for the sex. There's a clear reason why she married Simon, and it's literally because they could not keep their hands off each other.
He does have the cute, rosy cheeked mama's boy. You kind of want to pinch his little cheek kind of thing. He's very boy next door, despite being the prince of what? Prussia? What is he the prince of? God damn it! Why am I forgetting this?
England?
Prince of Prussia.
Prussia,
Jeez.
no. Yeah.
Brain.
He was sweet though, and I think that was what was really talking about him. Like, unlike everybody else who was like conniving and doing all sorts of shady deals, he was just like, he was like a puppy. He was like, you're nice to me, you're pretty, I like you, yay, here.
Well, that was my thing with it. I guess he was comparatively sweet. He was normal. I mean, he was like, basically his character is, I'm not going to make some girl marry me who doesn't want to marry me. That's it. That's the one thing I can say about him, which I'm like, good for you, dude.
That is the most compelling thing on that show about a man.
Fair enough.
Actually, do you want children? Would you like a family? What are your interests? Which, like, is not a thing that you see a lot. That, like, well, okay, and this is not to justify anyone in the show, as you know, for people who listen to our last episode, we have feels about the ethics of the show, in the sense that it is a giant train wreck and it's appealing to watch. But like, here's the thing: okay, maybe this is just the problem of like media in general. Like, I think, and I wonder if this is why we have this entire like narrative around like, girls only like bad boys. I'm like, no, it's because we tell stories about girls falling in love with bad boys because good relationships are boring.
Yeah.
But they're not boring. Well, I mean, this is my argument. This is why I like.
What does the show look like if she marries Friedrich? It just literally becomes she's wealthy and has lots of children. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't want to watch that.
To be fair, if the show follows the books, that is Daphne's life after this season.
Sure.
I'm not saying she should. Again, I'm not saying she should marry Friedrich. I'm just saying there is something compelling about someone actually caring about your interests. And also, whenever whenever Queen Charlotte's like, you should make her marry you, he's like, no, I'm like happy for them. Like, if she made her choice, it's fine. I respect that. And I'm not, again, I liked it. It was nice. And there are good relationships on TV at like a totally different show. Tammy Taylor and the coach on Friday Night Lights, they have a good marriage. It's compelling. This is me going on about,
soap opera in the way
marriage. Yeah. Well, okay.
Like, what I guess in my mind, okay, not having watched that show, but knowing vague things about it, like this is like a period soap opera.
Yeah.
Like, and soap operas tend not to have healthy relationships, at least not for the central character. So like it would at least go against genre. I'm not saying that like Prince Friedrich is like not a nice character. I mean, if I had to like hang out with one of these characters for an afternoon, I would probably want to hang out with Prince Friedrich, mostly because we could sit in the corner and basically look at the other people and be like, oh God, they're horrifying.
Hannah's being a little unfair though, because like so on Friday Night Lights, just because that's your example, right? It is a soap opera. Like Katya said, it's a soap opera. It's very much a soap opera.
It is a soap opera.
Their marriage is not perfect. He's not abusive. You know, it's just the drama of Friday Night Lights is, at least for that couple, the drama is they have the kinds of marital problems that literally everyone does. And there are, but like there are a lot of other characters who do have quite negative relationships on that show. Like Coach and his wife are pretty good, and then like drama is, well, okay, we need to compromise here for your career or for my career. Like stuff like that happens. And I don't know that you could build a whole show out of that if there weren't this massive high school drama going on around them. Right.
Mm-hmm. So I think what like Bridgerton is trying to do based on this like one book, one show scenario is like let each couple have their drama. And then like after they get married, have it be kind of like the marriage plot thing where it's a more stable relationship. Maybe. I don't know. I'm speculating. Some of the couples in Bridgerton are less dramatic than like in the books are less dramatic than their like TV show counterparts, which to be fair, it's Shonda Rhimes' like production company. So I should have expected this.
She's going to want drama. She's going to want something that makes for compelling television. TV is different than books, right? Which is why a lot of Americans just don't read, but it's not because it's work. It's that for a visual narrative, you want constant something going on. I don't know that I believe, we've talked about this on other shows. Like when we talk about superheroes, not letting them grow up, not letting them get married. I certainly don't believe that you can only be interesting if you're single and trying to find love. So I don't mind them having a marriage and dealing with marital issues. but there's no show if they're just happy. If every time they go, if you marry Friedrich and you go, okay, he's a nice guy. He's never going to do anything bad. He's going to be very agreeable on anything Daphne wants. He's going to say yes. And he's prince of a country. So they're just going to get it. And that's like, what do you do at that point?
Well, to be fair, it's the 19th century. Nobody's going to be happy.
Sure. But like, it's not the 19th century. It's a Netflix show, right? Like they're going to deal with Netflix issues.
Yeah. And the show isn't, I mean, it is obviously about like the 19th century in some ways, but also the thing that seems to be intriguing about the show is not specific to the 19th century. It's about shitty people being shitty to each other with some details and specificity to fit the time period.
Right.
Ish.
Yeah. Though to be fair,
also there's glitter on the costumes because speculative history.
Yeah. No. Well, to be fair, no one's happy now either.
I know we talked about this last time, but I still love that basically like the historic sewing community is basically like, yes, a TV show that we could unproblematically enjoy a historical fashion. Because it's not trying to be historically accurate. And you know what? I'm here for it. I'm here for Regency fashion with glitter.
I wish I could cite specifically the YouTube video, and honestly, it's probably all of them based on how you're describing it. But someone like rated all the like recent period dramas based on like accuracy, and for Bridgerton, they were like,
is it the one that's ranking? I believe is the title Regency Thirst Traps. I think it might be Regency Thirst Traps.
I don't think it was that one. But
I will find it for the show notes.
I'm sure it's similar. And they were like, honestly, like Bridgerton doesn't follow like all the conventions, but it like purposefully, and as we like linked in the show notes last time, like this is what they were doing. They purposefully chose what to keep and what to discard, and it works. So let's celebrate the glitter.
Okay, it's not called Regency Thirst Traps. It's the subtitle is Why Are Regency Men So Hot? But it's from Abby Cox, which basically, if you are at all interested in historic fashion and people being snarky, you should absolutely check out Abby Cox on YouTube. It will absolutely be in the show notes because she is delightful and hilarious and actually knows her shit.
And she also did that video on the Muppets Christmas Carol that she
did. Yeah, just generally watch Abby Cox. She's delightful. Anyway.
Are Regency men hot? I don't know.
I mean, Rowans are like Simon. Simon, yes. Yes, he is. Is there a conversation here?
Sorry, are we having a conversation about like, well, okay, when we say are Regency men attractive, I think what we really mean is, do we like men in Regency fashion?
Fair enough, because I was thinking Hugh Grant in Sense and Sensibility, and I was like,
oh, okay. I thought you were asking me if the dude who plays Simon is hot, and I'm like,
no,
yeah.
I'm not gonna
yes, absolutely. Right, but he's also hot, like in any period of clothing. Like,
yes, that's why I was like,
or none, or none,
none.
Oh, okay, yes.
Also, he's going to be in the Dungeons and Dragons movie. Can we just pause and talk about that for a second?
Yeah, he hosted Saturday Night Live this week too, which was interesting.
I liked it. Yeah, I liked it.
Yeah. If they did cast him as James Bond, which is like a rumor going around the internet, I actually would watch that James Bond film. I'll just say that.
I would be here for it. Yes.
Yeah.
Because who's not attractive? Daniel Craig.
Oh, I just realized in all of our wondering, actually, there is a stable couple on Bridgerton, and I really loved every one of their scenes. And I'm actually really interested in where their story is going to go. Will and Alice Mondrick, the boxer, and his wife,
who were created for the show.
Yeah.
I think they're a good example because they're what I was talking about. They had an issue. I mean, they were invented for the series. They're not in the book, or at least not the first book that I read. So I don't know if they ever show up. But for the series, they have a marriage and they have a reasonable marital problem of, look, we've got to figure out what's the best way to save our money. And do you want to throw this fight or not? And I found that interesting and compelling. I have been a married person who needs money. So
and to be fair, I'm not arguing that people shouldn't have problems because that's boring. I'm arguing that you can have problems but be married and still
absolutely, I agree,
cheat on someone or insert ridiculous thing here. But actually, that's interesting that you mentioned that they're just for the show, because actually, quite a few characters were invented for the show that are both outside the titled aristocracy, Madame Delacroix and Sienna, who I thought was a really great character who deserved better than Anthony Bridgerton, but whatever. And also the Queen Charlotte and King George on the other end of the spectrum of rank. They're not really in the books. And typically, if you read an Austen novel, you might forget that there's a queen and a king in England because no one wants to write about them.
Mm-hmm.
So like this is like actually a pretty like interesting thing where you see a like wide like spectrum of like the world of London.
I do think it's interesting, the whole Sienna thing, because you really did get to see how people who weren't aristocracy but weren't like destitute were interacting with society. Because for the beginning, the first few episodes when she was around, I was like, oh, she's a prostitute. But then I was like, oh, wait, no, she's an opera singer, which is actually, I would think, somebody that, you know, that's a skill, like a very good skill. Although I suppose like courtesans all had skills. So maybe this was sort of the end of that era where your hookers are actually still educated and what. But I just thought it was really interesting because she wasn't like, you know, living out on the streets. You know, she had a job. She made her own money. And yet she still had to sort of figure out how to milk the aristocracy to be settled.
And she's in a weird place because, so I mean, I understand Hannah's point. She deserves better than Anthony Bridgerton. But I also thought that their relationship for me was one of the most compelling things on the show, just watching her navigate that. And it's the one thing that makes me feel sorry for Anthony, right? Is that he appears to have legitimate feelings. He's a dick, but he appears to have legitimate feelings that are, you know, you sort of get that he is being controlled by this caste system just as much as Daphne or anybody else. And I think you only get that because of Sienna.
Right. Yeah, I agree. That definitely she was there to make him, you know, to make you feel sad for him because he couldn't be with the girl he loved because she wasn't, you know, quote unquote good enough. But at the same time, you're like, you're a dick.
I mean, I don't know if I don't know if she's going to come back or not, but I find her interesting. So I would hope she does.
I hope she does. She's cool.
She is cool.
In the book, she does.
Oh, does she?
Well, I don't remember if that's the exact name, but yes, in the second book, that's where they got it, that he was in love and having an affair with this opera singer.
Okay.
And Kate, finds out about it. Anthony is courting her sister, and Kate finds out about the opera singer, and of course, you know, wackiness ensues.
These are characters that I do not know yet, but so if they're going to continue that, I mean, I guess they'd have to, in order to make it interesting, they have to continue the affair, which I'm okay with because, yeah, sure, it's a cheating narrative, but I think it's an interesting one that I want to see resolve. You know, yeah, it would be great if there was a role for a woman on television that wasn't I'm the mistress. Yeah, I understand that. But on the other hand, you can add that, and she's doing a good enough job at this story that I want to see her play it out.
So I feel like there was a conclusion to her arc with Anthony at the end of the first season. And I would really like, I don't know if some of these background characters will come back, or at least in the capacity that they were in the first season, because it feels like you know, like Sienna, in particular, like her role did focus on her relationship with Anthony, but she also had a good like friendship. And actually, like I think one of the interesting things about the show we didn't talk about last time was the female friendships of the show, like her relationship with Madame Delacroix, and like how they like hung out and like got drunk together in the dress shop, and that was just delightful. And you know, like female friendships in the Regency period and in the 19th century were very important. Sharon Marcus has written a book called Between Women. And if you're thinking that sounds also like it's about like relationships that are romantic, you're absolutely correct. It covers like different types of female relationships. But what she says, like even, you know, female friendships were important because the network of female friends could help you find a relationship, which feels true.
Well, I think the problem with having Sienna come back, I mean, I think you're right that her story sort of had an end. It had a resolve. She said, you know, he said, I'm going to be with you anyway. And she said, dude, no. And the problem is if you try and bring that back, that's going to undercut making Anthony the hero of the romantic story where he finds true love with this other woman.
But it sounds like you're telling me, and I don't know the book. Are you saying that in the book, one of the biggest roadblocks in the way of his relationship with the other woman is that he's having an affair with Sienna, right?
No.
Okay.
I mean, one of the biggest roadblocks is, well, Anthony himself. He refuses to love anyone.
Yes. Okay.
And you know, in the book anyway, he has reasons, you know, for that. So this is part of why he kind of kept up his relationship with Sienna, is because he knows he can't be with her. He doesn't really love her. It's not a serious thing. Huh. So
that's different than the show. Cause I mean, at least for me, I felt like he did love her in the show. He's just,
which I think is better because it makes him marginally less of a jerk.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and I do feel like leaves him in a similar position where he's like, I will not love anyone. Love is like the mistake. And it's like, all right, bro, I'm sure.
It gives you a reason to care about him rather than saying, I don't care if you like, without her right now, I would be like, I don't care if dude gets married or not. Fuck him. So I think that's something.
What's with all these guys making these grand like statements like I can never have a baby, I can never fall in love? Like it's like, is that like I mean, I know it's not, but I feel like is this like a Regency trope?
I think it's falls into the trope of the Regency romance in the sense that men were not supposed to love. We're not supposed to fall in love. And so that if you admit that you're in love, it's a weakness. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case for Anthony. I mean, I can tell you what it is. I don't know if you want. I mean, I have no idea if they're going to keep it, so I have no idea if it's a spoiler. But
this whole show is spoilers today. So,
okay. So Anthony's story starts out with the fact that his father died, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And what happens is he's convinced that he can never be a greater man than his father. He can never surpass his father, including in life. So he is convinced that he will die on or before his 38th year, which is when his father died. And that is why he does not want to love his wife, because it will be that much harder knowing that he's going to die. And if she loves him, then she'll be all more upset, etc. As motivations go, it's kind of convoluted and dumb.
To be fair, Simon had the stupidest logic as well.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what I mean. Like these weird daddy issues.
His father died, so it really affected him, is how they sort of play it, right? So, and this, of course, is then why he resolves he's not going to marry for love. He's going to marry someone who will make a good wife. Then, of course, winds up falling in love, which terrifies him.
But I mean, essentially, you're saying so the problem is he's an idiot.
Yes.
I mean, like that's.
He's a jerk.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, if we're talking about genre tropes of the soap opera, well, here we are.
It'll be interesting to see if they go into that. Because you certainly didn't get that impression that he like had such a daddy issue from the interaction we had with him this season.
Yeah.
Although the bee buzzing around was, I think, they're trying to allude to that. One of those little, Easter eggs that people who've read the books are like, oh, because the father died from a bee sting.
Yeah, they mentioned that, like in passing, I think, didn't they? It was just like really brief.
Well,
if they did, I didn't catch it.
If it was mentioned, I did not pick up on it.
And I watched the season twice, and I didn't pick up on it either.
Oh, I knew it. So maybe I just knew it from like research. I don't know, but I did know, and I don't remember reading it. But I don't know. The world's a blur. There's a pandemic going on.
That plays into actually Anthony getting married.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Wait a minute. There's a pandemic on?
Yeah, right.
And then we all watched this show in like a fever dream, like 48 hours.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit last time about, how popular the show was. And I find it fascinating because I'm still seeing people just sort of picking it up, which is something that it's not dominating the conversation like it did 4 weeks ago, but it's still out there. That's some staying power. So I get why it's coming back. And I was talking with some people I was talking with a guy who was watching it, and he was very much like, oh, this is supposed to be a girl show. And I was like, really? It's a Regency romance. I mean, how many of those have you watched before? By Shonda, and he's like, oh yeah, I guess so. So I
to be fair, the showrunner is a man. She's just an executive producer. I mean, you're right. Like traditionally speaking, people have been like regency romance women. I'm just saying, I just want to make it clear that Shonda's not the showrunner because
she's producer. Mm-hmm. It's her Netflix 18 picture production deal or whatever it is. She's got some obscenely awesome contract with them.
Does that mean somehow that COVID is eating away at toxic masculinity such that men can enjoy regency television without retribution?
It'd be delightful.
Because I would love for there to be a silver lining to this last year.
I mean, I don't know. It is. I mean, it's not. I'm
interested in why this show did not strike him as a tradition.
I don't know.
I guess I'm curious. Is that a statement about this is a show that's just for everybody, or it was something about the way that the show was presented did not strike him as this is a show marketed towards women?
I think I'm guessing, right? I think his point was, this is just a good, drama that's produced for everyone, like all other shows, which I don't know. I mean,
I wonder if it's just because it's because I feel like a similar thing could almost be said about the Queen's Gambit, although I think that appeal is a little bit broader, but it is still and I wouldn't call that a show that's made for a primarily female audience, but I think it appeals to a female audience in a way that not every TV show does, if that makes sense.
Well, I also think
there's something to do with just the way that Netflix, because at this point we're watching everything through Netflix. Everything is a Netflix show, whether it's actually a Netflix produced show or not. Is it just the fact that because we're all on Netflix and Netflix just puts it up at the top of their bar, we're just that is a show for me because Netflix is just says it is.
I think they've got a little bit of control like that, but to the amount of penetration they've gotten, that would only work if it's good enough to keep going, right?
Well, if you look at Netflix other shows, I mean, everything from the Marvel shows to the Witcher, etc. It's Woo Assassin, Warrior Nun. They're kind of building their cachet that, that maybe guys are kind of it's a new Netflix show. Okay, try it.
From a user interface perspective, at least on I don't use it on my computer, but I just noticed on the Netflix app, Netflix originals are privileged, not in search results, but on the main page, you are going to see Netflix originals more often than not. So it's not, I think saying that they have very little control is a little misleading. It's their platform.
Well, yeah.
And they could artificially
sure.
I don't think that they do because they're all very popular, but they're also very popular.
I think they do because you're not. I mean, Nicole mentioned Warrior Nun. Warrior Nun, they were all in on, but it hasn't gotten anywhere near the cultural penetration that Bridgerton did.
I've never heard of this.
Right. Yeah. There you go. And I don't think Warrior Nun's a comic book superhero, and they lost their Marvel license, so this was the attempt to get it back. That's what it was. And, it's if they were going to push anything, that's the show I would expect them to try to force everyone to watch. Hannah, you're talking about the Queens and stuff. I am curious about what you had to say about, I don't even want to limit it to just Regency specifically. The whole period drama of it, historical-ish. When we talked about this last time, from the gender perspective, it surprises me a little bit that it did so well. But it also surprises me that it did so well, less from the gender, but more from it is a, historical fiction is not the best selling. Now, it's never a poorly selling market. But it's always sort of, I don't know if we're going to say A, B, C, D, F, it's always at a B level, right? It's never been, at least in our lifetimes, at the superhero level. It's never been at the cowboy level. It's never been, but it's always been, just sort of there. It's endured for a long time. So it surprises me that it's gotten so much play just being this 18th century or 19th century, narrative, even, just the weirdness of it being a period drama at all and getting attention outside of who it's targeted at. That seems odd to me. And I think that kind of ties into your thoughts on, how it displays empire, because I wonder if it's about as historically accurate as Game of Thrones, right?
I mean, it doesn't have dragons, so
veneer of historical accuracy, though. I think in a way that I think one of the things that's interesting about this show is there are some shows that I feel which of course I can't think of a good example, but there are some shows that are are sort of speculative history or alternate history in the way that Bridgerton is, that are more like obviously fantasy. I mean, Game of Thrones is maybe one, but again, yeah, dragons. So it's like its own thing.
What's that? Castle one? High Castle?
Man in the High Castle.
Man in the High Castle. Yeah, that one.
Well, that's sci-fi.
That's speculative history in a very obvious way.
Yeah, right? No, I guess that's true.
It's speculative present.
It's complicated.
Yeah.
So like, I think I find interesting about Bridgerton is that like it has the facade of historical accuracy without anyone actually believing it's historically accurate, which I feel like is unusual because usually when I feel like I see shows that do that, there's always like a community I see online that are like, what? No, this is not historically accurate, which might be because I'm part of like historical fashion nerd land and the algorithm knows that I don't see those people as much but like, I do think it Bridgerton does make it like sort of, I think, obvious in a way that it's fantasy, even though it like has the aesthetic.
And I'm wondering if that's true.
In a way, I don't know.
Is that true of non-nerds, right? Like you are literally a literary nerd. You have friends who are in this world and you have friends who aren't in this world, but they're in the historical fashion world, right? Like you are plugged into a circle where I don't think where people are going to be like, okay, yeah, it's not supposed to be accurate. It's, it's a fantasy, idiot. Like you're going to get people who just have that. I don't know that like, and I didn't ask him because I didn't think to, but like my friend who was like, oh, wow, this isn't supposed, this isn't supposed to be an everybody show. Like, I don't know that he would recognize the historical inaccuracies. I think he even so much as the.
Would he think this is a history? I guess what I'm saying, like, does he like, but are people taking this as this is history? Like, that's what I'm saying. I don't think I haven't seen anyone talk about this as if this is history.
Right. But I'm wondering,
it's kind of hard to when one of the main leads is black.
Right. But do they care enough to think of the accuracy? Right. Like I'm wondering if they think it's historically accurate in the same way they think Hamilton is historically accurate.
I think it's a moot point. I don't think it actually matters for Bridgerton in a way that like for Hamilton, I think people are like, oh yeah, it's historically accurate,
to a point.
To a point. Whereas I think for Bridgerton, it's just sort of like, here is like history as aesthetics rather than we're looking at this as like, this is history and I'm learning something from it.
Well, okay. So like, I think that actually, well, one, there are the racists on the internet who I'm not going to say more about.
Yeah, but they're unhelpful. Who
like have been using quote historical accuracy as a way to criticize the show. And to you, I say, sir, go home and read some actual history books if you care so much and understand that there were people of color in London in the 18th and 19th centuries. Again, many of them free. So of course, racism still existed, and but to
slavery before we did. So
to the more interesting and fruitful conversation about historical accuracy, there are a lot of critics, like academics, who like are thinking about like historical accuracy in the sense that there is this tension between basically the speculative concept in the show Bridgerton that Queen Charlotte and King George married and it fixed racism and everything is fine now. And the like historical realities of empire, like I will link in the show notes some very good analysis of like Simon licking a spoon of sugar. And of course, sugar was an import from the plantations. And I've talked before on the show about critics like Eugenia Zarowski, who wrote A Taste of China, and like how like her work shows that like imported objects were embedded in everyday life. Like if you read a 19th century novel and you pay attention to like the furniture or whatever, and this is like goes back to like a long conversation about what if the curtains are just blue? No, actually, if you pay attention to the furniture or like the objects in the house, you might see the spoils of empire just littered throughout the text in the background. Emma in Jane Austen, they talk about how her fortune comes from other sources, potentially empire. I mean, like, just because Emma doesn't venture beyond Highbury doesn't mean that like her world isn't deeply connected to the colonies. And I went on a long rant like 2 years ago, if you remember, about the Jane Austen role-playing game Good Society and how they were interested in a like very superficial like inclusivity, but they didn't want to deal with the complicated intricacies of race and empire. And there's always this tension there. And the very real fact is that, land and like estates, places like where, Simon is, were deeply harmful and exploitive. And, some critics like Marlene Dott, who studies Haiti, talks about how, in existing, Bridgerton actually erases Haiti, which overthrew slavery in the Haitian Revolution and had its own black aristocracy. And I will link to that article in the show notes as well, so you can read her fabulous argument. So this is all to say, Bridgerton doesn't really address empire, except for the fact that Will's father freed himself from slavery, and there are the spoils of empire all around. I'm really interested in season 2 and how they're introducing the new female lead, which I won't say more about because I guess spoilers for season 2, book 2, but they reimagined that character as being of Indian descent. And, the East India Company had its hooks in India at the time. And even Pirates of the Caribbean knew that the East India Company was real bad. So I'm very interested in yeah, I'm just interested in what they're going to do. So there's my empire rant. You can just never escape from empire is what I'm saying.
So I'm kind of curious if okay, and I mainly know this because of talking to Hannah for many, many years. I'm kind of curious how they're going to do this sort of modern style storytelling about the 19th century without talking about empire. Especially considering they've done they have they have changed racial representation, and they have this whole side story about slavery, which was really not addressed in the first season, which I feel was a giant plot hole. I think we talked about that the last episode. But can they get away with not talking about empire? Are they trying to?
I think they can, because they'll do, and again, this goes to the original question, right? I don't know that the regular viewer, the not an academic, the not regency nerd, the not, and I don't mean just academics. I mean, if you are a regular reader of romance novels to where you've read, of Regency era romance novels in particular, to where you've read dozens or hundreds of these, you might have those questions. But Bridgerton's got a massive crossover appeal of people who mostly watch superhero shows. I mean, I'm not exaggerating there, right? So does that question matter to them at all? Or can they...
I mean, okay, well, let's say Thor Ragnarok did was one of the most explicitly decolonial kind of
narratives. Yeah, because Taika Waititi is a great director. Yeah. But he dealt with it. I'm saying, did he have to? They hand waved away racism in the first season. They're oh yeah, married a black woman, racism went away, we're good, right? So do you think that I wonder if they'll just do that and then really piss Hannah off, right?
If they continue to do that, because I think that's my main frustration with the show. I mean, I love many aspects of the show, but that is such a glaring plot hole. Wow.
I mean, both can work.
Sure. And I guess my thing is it's I hear the Marvel audience and whatever, but also I guess the people I see in my we're talking about my little corner of media world, these are the people that consume period dramas on the reg, which are probably at least if not a majority. I don't think that's a small enough segment. I would be surprised if that was majority of Bridgerton's audience. I think it is a core audience, though.
I agree, but my answer there is the exact same as it is for when it's a superhero show. People will go so on a superhero show they'll do something they'll change the gender of a character, or they'll make it a minority. They'll diversify the cast, and people. There's a small subset of incels who are going to maybe actually boycott, right? But the majority of them, the reason you can change the Ancient One to a woman in Doctor Strange is because what are you going to do? Not watch Doctor Strange? The people, they might care about it a lot, but if you're a person who's super into Regency romance, it's the best one on the air. You're going to not watch it because we didn't do the thing that you really care about?
Yeah.
We've trapped you.
I see people all the time who watch a lot of period dramas that basically like are like, nope, I'm not going to watch this because it's historically garbage.
Okay.
Because it's like, I think it's specifically because like this is a story, like these are stories that you can get in a lot of other medium, like audiobooks, actual books, like in a way that like but
those don't have glitter. That's what I'm saying is they went and they did something that they made it an entertaining enough show that, I mean, we're doing it right now. We recognize the inaccuracies, and each one of us is like, yeah, but I'll give it a pass because there was glitter, you know? Like, I mean, like that's so like
I would give it a pass for season 2.
Okay.
Like I might give it a pass. Like I mean, obviously I give it a pass for season 1 because I was fascinated. Like, what are they going to do with this? I think though, if they continue doing the same thing, like basically if it continues being a fluff TV show, I think it will lose a lot of its appeal because there's lots of good fluff television.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is that there's so much potential to do a more interesting story here and have a lot more depth in a way that's really engaging that I don't know if I would have a patience for a second season or a third season.
The thing that's really frustrating, I think, is that we are recognizing that they obviously stepped out of the like white people only can be in England, you know, London, England at the time kind of like mindset, right? Like it was a clear, distinct choice to make the cast what they made it. And then to acknowledge, however briefly, to be like, oh yeah, no, Queen Charlotte, she's black, so everything's cool now. Because they basically say that. And then you think, okay, they're gonna touch on that eventually. Like why would you just throw that line in and then wave it off? Especially in this cultural moment, right? Like there is a lot happening right now, and it just seems disingenuous, especially coming from Shondaland, to just be like, yeah, no racism, that's whatever, everything's cool, man. Like I think we're almost expecting it because it's like you did it, you have everybody's attention, now fucking teach them something.
If they want it, like, and I would totally understand the argument for like, oh, we just want to make a Regency drama and have fun doing a historical period thing without having to talk about race, but also have it be inclusive as far as casting. I think you absolutely could have done that. It should not have then been a plot point. I think as soon as they made it a plot point where they made like, then I think you're exactly right. It built an expectation that this is going to be part of the story. Like, because I was in some ways kind of surprised, like, because the first couple episodes made me think, like, oh, no, this is just a diverse cast in a period drama, and we're just going to roll with it.
Which is fine. But yes.
Right, which is totally fine. And I think equally, not only equally valid, but I think equally valuable as far as what what they're doing. But I guess in my mind, it's like you can't have it both ways. Right. Like you can't build the expectation of we're going to engage on the subject of race and in the 19th century in some capacity, but then back out at the last second.
And I have to throw in here that Bridgerton's gotten the most attention, but this is not the only show to have like people of color cast in 19th century periods. David Copperfield, that's colorblind casting, which is slightly different, but stars Dev Patel, so I'm going to mention it. Also, it's Dickens. Another Dickens BBC adaptation, Little Dorrit. They cast a character that was white in the books as black, Taddy Coram, and in doing so, like that role took on a whole different meaning. Recently, Sanditon featured Jane Austen's distinctly black heroine, and they expanded her role, and so on and so forth. I mean, like some of these are like have varying like degrees of success in terms of representation. I actually just attended a talk by JANSA New York, where Gretchen, Dr. Gretchen Holbrook Gerzina talked about representation in Bridgerton, Sanditon, and David Copperfield in relation to like representations in the 19th century. It was very interesting. I wish I could link to it, but there's not a public recording. Point is, you should buy her books. Fantastic, like and listen to her BBC podcast series, which were linked in the original Bridgerton episode. Fantastic. But like this is not the first one, the first show to like do this. It's just the one that's gotten like the most attention. And I also just wonder, and you're going to say, well, Hannah, you always feel this way because you're anxious all the time. Can there ever be like guilt-free enjoyment of a Regency period drama because of just how steeped in Empire and how much like you owe to Empire to produce the quote fun parts of the world? And I asked this question 2 years ago when I was talking about role playing and Jane Austen games, and I still don't have an answer. So I kick it to you.
My answer to that question, though, is for you, no. There is no way to make a Regency period drama that won't have problems that Hannah Lee Rogers is going to be annoyed by. It's impossible. There's no way to make a superhero show that Christopher Maverick is not going to be annoyed by. It can't be done. I love, the only, it's pop culture. Pop culture cannot be perfect because someone's going to make, in the interest of story, they're going to make not even mistakes. They're going to make choices that we're going to be critical of because we're nerds that went to college forever in order to be able to criticize crap like this. That's what we do. We have a whole podcast about it. So I don't think so. I don't think you're ever going to, there's only been one perfect show in the history of television, and it's Riverdale.
We're gonna avoid that. We're gonna gloss on by that.
And Riverdale's not perfect. I'm lying, right? I'm critical of Riverdale all the time. So
rightly so.
And I love it.
I think also what Hannah's talking about is I don't know. It's like the separation between.
It's difficult. You're in some ways you're irresponsible not to acknowledge empire, but then once you acknowledge empire, it's a question of what you do with it.
Right.
So this reminds me a little bit of the way I feel about the representation of race or marginalized people historically or whatever in video games.
Right.
Because it's a similar problem. And I think this is probably why they've made the decision to kind of sidestep the racial thing, even though they introduce it in the first season. So I kind of get it, which is why I'm interested in seeing how they deal with it, is because you have this issue of you're going to have you're going to address race in a video game. But the problem that becomes because that a medium that many people play for escapism then become again, enthusiasts of historical dress. There's a big conversation of basically how do you grapple with being a person of color and also do look because I think for a lot of people, both wanting to represent the history of what actually in historical period stuff, aesthetically pleasing and cool as it is. I totally get that it's also you're not acknowledging the historical reality. And then are you allowing people to have a misconception of history in a way that's damaging?
Because it's what I know from Hannah is it's the Jane Austen problem, right? You're talking about a time period. Hannah studies a time period, which one of the most defining, aspects of that time period is this problem. So you have a choice. You can deal with it and then annoy people, or you can be fun and ignore it and then annoy people.
Right.
So what do you do?
To, I guess, transition a little bit, but also stay on high. I talked about this last episode, but what really was interesting to me about that one scene between Queen Charlotte and King George, and I should say that King George at this point in his life had multiple physical and mental health disabilities. You can see in the show he's portrayed as having dementia. They tie his relationship to Queen Charlotte to precarity, and I do think that it's not just totally a fluff romance, because you can see at any point George could change his mind and thus change the fate of England, which also makes me wonder how they're portraying his mental health in this as kind of the quote Mad King. I mean, in Hamilton is kind of a joke when they portray King George. King George is not taken very seriously by an American audience because of the revolution.
Well, I think it's interesting. Just comparing it to Hamilton, in the Hamilton cast, he was the only white person. And also what you just kind of said about how he could just at any point change his mind and kind of change everything. It's he's the embodiment of white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And actually that's really interesting too, when thinking about how, Simon's father was raised to be the Duke of Hastings, and he enacts Simon's father is black, but he is extremely ableist towards Simon's stammer. And there seems to disability scholars, tell us that there's an intersection between racism and ableism, but it seems to kind of converge there, where other scholars talk about this too, where the Duke is put into a position where he's carrying on the authority of all the bad baggage of England and enacting it upon his son. And that is like horrifying on many levels.
I just realized the obvious. I mean, to speak to the flaws, if racism doesn't exist in their world because King George married Queen Charlotte, then that could not have been long enough away for Simon's father to be what Simon's father is. Like he seems to have a lot of genetically bred in privilege of class, not genetically, like an upbringing that he would have to have been older than King George to have, like he's too old to have been in the period when Queen Charlotte was and he got married. They would have had to abolish racism at least a generation ago, or he wouldn't be that guy.
And, actually, like I realized that the like final kind of quote about Simon's stammer at the end of the series is Daphne speaking to Lady Danbury, and she says, "You helped him. You helped him overcome his impediment," which, like, using the word overcome has its own baggage in the disability community, and especially thinking about stutters with like Joe Biden or even Amanda Gorman. And then Daphne tells Simon, just because something is not perfect does not make it less worthy to be loved. And it's strange that like the Duke of Hastings actually kind of is the long shadow of like all the bad things in the world. Because, you at least feel like something for King George because the Queen loves him and he's very sad about the death of his daughter. And there's like some humanization there. But I don't think that they give the Duke any sort of space. He doesn't care about his wife when she dies. He's just like, I want a son. And then he's a dick to Simon.
Yeah.
But I think that like even as this show tries to move away from stereotypes, and other people talked about this and we've talked about this, they continue to re-inscribe them sometimes by their casting choices, which includes Marina Thompson's storyline, which I hope to God they change from the books. That's all I'll say.
I still don't know. I mean, I know little bits and pieces from what you guys have told me, but I know. But again, we talked about this last episode. She's barely, when we hinted at her and we said we were going to talk about this, she's barely in the book. So this is what you want to talk about is very much an invention of the show for this season, right?
Yeah, and she also like clearly struggles with depression throughout the back half of this season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, she's put in a position where I feel like she is utterly helpless, and to some extent probably has some PTSD because they just ship her away, presumably because they know she's pregnant, or maybe they like, I get the feeling that perhaps she was also being abused back at the farm a little bit. Like that was not a good situation for her.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
over so much.
And she's only kept at the Featheringtons, which, by the way, can I just say that the Featherington name and Whistledown just like perfectly fit with the whole like 18th, 19th century aesthetic. Like, Dickens has characters called Honey Thunder. Anyway, aside, she's only kept...
Did you say the word Honey Thunder?
Yes. It's amazing. I'm going to name a cat that one day. Anyway.
Great.
Anyway, she's only kept at the Featherington home because Mr. Featherington owes her father a debt. So that's like also another like way that she's sort of being marketed.
Right.
Yeah, like at best she's being used in some kind of weird pawn of her father, possibly to get her to like fall in love with somebody else because he doesn't like approve of her, the person she's in love with. Like at best, and then at worst it's sort of like, great, like he knows that she's pregnant and is sending her away because like he thinks that that's a grounds for disowning your child. So it's just, it's not great. It's not great. Also, okay, not a 19th century person, but like the tea thing. Like I know nothing about medicine. I know very little about herbal medicine. Like, this is not a thing. In my mind,
absolutely a thing.
Well, in my mind,
like,
before you explain this, like she just became like like Matlock. I don't know spit about law. I don't know spit about medicine. Just an old country.
I mean, like, okay, I guess it's just my experience watching the show.
Yeah.
Is she basically goes to the pantry, a place for making food, puts a bunch of things in a tea, and thinks that this is going to cause a give her an abortion.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's a way to cause an abortion through natural medicine. I just don't think the pantry of the average, like, upper class British family is the place that's going to have it. I could be wrong.
I thought that was the case, and I was very angry about it when I watched it and I actually rewatched it today right before this because I was like, what the F does she put in that? And so you can clearly see she picks juniper berries and dandelion root, and then they do like a very good job of like the shot only says like dried and then like one letter, and it's like clove. Is it cloves? Like you do not know what the other stuff is, and then the last thing she grabs is not even labeled, but it is 100% a handful of rose petals.
Okay.
So
with the kitchen where you keep your arsenic, sure. Okay.
Well, right. When I was like, that's ridiculous.
Vial she had in her pocket in case of emergency that didn't appear. Because they have the Mythbusters problem of they don't want to accidentally teach people how to potentially kill themselves.
Correct. Yes. But what I found really interesting is that like the really, really common thing. So like I should say that this is in no way like not something that people knew. Did Daphne know how to do this? Obviously not, because Daphne didn't know shit.
Yeah, Daphne's an idiot.
But know how babies work, so
correct.
Right.
So she certainly wouldn't know how to get rid of a baby. But what I find really interesting is that one of the most common like things that you do to give yourself an abortion at this time period was ergot. You would give yourself ergot poison, and
hold on, ergot is not winning an Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony, and some R word.
Correct.
No, that's Salem witchcraft trials.
Exactly. Ergot is like a fungus that grows on grain. And they think it's the thing that made all the people see the devil in Salem because they all ate tainted grain over the winter.
Awesome.
Similarities to LSD.
It's what LSD is derived from.
Huh. Okay.
So it is some high quality shit.
Mav afterwards, where can I get?
Don't let anyone ever say that the show was not helpful.
Yes, we're educational.
I'm teaching. But no, it's really interesting. So it was totally used like for a very long time. Like they have known that it was ergot, and they have known that they used it in like to quote unquote quicken labor back in the 1500s. Like they knew that this is what.
But that's like hanging out in the average. I guess the part that like bothered me was the average pantry.
Well, they're not average though. They're really rich and they've got.
Okay, sure.
And by rich, you mean deeply in debt.
Does one keep ergot in the like 19th century pantry?
Well, probably not, unless your grains went bad. I mean, you would have stored grains, and if she knew what to look for, like all it is like the top of it. Like you would go into your wheat in stores, and you'd be like, "Oh, this wheat's starting to go," and like I can use this. Now, do I think she did? Probably not. But what I am trying to say is that
she didn't know what she was doing.
Correct. But I also think it's really interesting is that I didn't think that this would have been, quite as common knowledge as it was. And so I did some research over the past week. And apparently this was incredibly common in Europe. They absolutely prescribed it. And so what I found and how I found this is that there was Europeans knew that it could poison you. Like they knew that it could get rid of your baby, but it also like caused a lot of damage to your body. And then when people in America figured out that it got rid of babies, they were like, woo! And they just took it like willy nilly. And so in 1822, some guy named David Horsack, who was from Colombia, basically said in 1822, hey, we should probably stop recommending this as like an abortion thing and only use it after babies are born, because then it does less damage to the mother. So it is actually still what they use for postpartum hemorrhaging now. Like that is still a drug, but they definitely knew in the early 1800s that it caused this. So I just thought that was interesting.
So be wary of green tea.
And I will say that, actually, some 18th century literature definitely alludes to abortions, because I remember Moll Flanders by Dan Defoe being like, maybe I shouldn't get an abortion, but maybe it'd be cool if things happen naturally.
Right.
That's a quote.
How does information circulate? Do people because it's I'm assuming this is not something being published in the Average Ladies magazine.
So
sewing
can
circles.
Yeah.
Hey, okay, historically probably, but
Yeah, that would be my guess.
So I put a picture in the thing of from the 1840s of like quote unquote the midwife essentially that performed abortions, and then there was this really weird shift. So I also found out in the early, like up until about 1820, abortions were considered a misdemeanor as long as you couldn't feel the baby kick.
Huh.
So
interesting.
It was totally like, oh, all right. As long as it hasn't quickened, which I think is when the baby starts to move around, then they're like, you shouldn't do that. But it's not. It wasn't punishable. You know, it was a misdemeanor. And then after that point, it'd be like, no, that is like a felony. You've basically committed murder. And that's where they drew the line. And then so apparently it started to get like much like we see now. It started to become more and more conservative in the way that they dealt with. The other thing I will say is that I think a lot of people know pennyroyal as an herb that like a lot of people think of, which again, I was like, the kitchen thing was what bothered me too, right? I was like, why would you keep these things in your kitchen if they're toxic? Well, apparently up until very recently, people use pennyroyal as a culinary herb.
Oh, whoops.
It was something you would use to season like pork and all sorts of things. So it would have potentially, especially in an upper class thing. I actually found a company that is currently selling pennyroyal as like high, it's an article from Vogue, and it's basically like, here's this fancy ass company that's selling like, you know, bespoke herbs for your culinary adventures. And it's like, here's oregano from Amargos, and here's flowers from like the Mediterranean. Here's pennyroyal, and here's fresh parsley seeds. Like, so there's definitely still people using it culinarily. So there you go. So I will admit that I yelled at the TV because I didn't think there would be anything in that pantry that would work. And apparently it does. Or there might have been. So I'm going to link that weird Vogue article too.
Yeah,
I love a weird Vogue article. I mean, also technically licorice root tea in like massive quantities is also really bad for you, apparently.
Yeah, a lot of stuff. So do you guys want to hear a very TMI story? And you can put this on the air. I don't care.
Yes.
For the Super Bowl, I made parsley, falafel flatbread. And it was like this beautiful dark green in it. Like you basically took 2 bunches of parsley and you put it in the food processor and you mixed these and you baked it. And it was delicious. And I ate a bunch of it. And then I was like, what is wrong with me? Why is my period starting like 5 days early? Why is it lasting 11 days? I do not understand what's happening. And then I was like, oh, right. Parsley makes your period come. And that's something that people would use if like you miscarried, or they would try to induce a miscarriage, or you would, like if you were late and not pregnant, you would take parsley tea and it would come. And I think I dropped off because none of you were there.
No, we're just listening. Fascination.
But yes, and so I was like 11 days long, and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? And then I was like, oh, wow, that really worked.
Yeah, there's no drop off. Everybody's like, wow, okay. I have nothing to add here. This is fascinating.
I mean, it was one of those things where like I completely didn't think about it until I was like, like 9 days in, and I was like, I have to go to the doctor. Like, what is wrong? And then I was like, wait a minute. Oh my God, I just ate too much parsley. And that's like what it's known to do. So there you go. Fun fact.
The more you know.
See, this is why conversation between different disciplines is so important.
Yeah, I want to do so many
much
plant shows. I just want to do so many plant shows now.
Well, I have a whole chapter of my dissertation talking about plant sex and desire.
Ooh, very good.
Okay, actually, literature about plant sex is a weird, fascinating, and actually historically quite important field.
Yes.
So,
okay, look,
coming soon to a podcast near you.
All the Darwins.
Also important to, yes, I was about to think, okay.
All the Darwins, like Erasmus.
The lives of the plants, Erasmus Darwin. Like we need, I don't know what episode we're going to talk about Erasmus Darwin on, but we need to do it. And also people just need, you guys need to find Lives of the Plants. It's one of my favorite books, mainly because the footnotes are ridiculous.
Do you remember when I was writing my dissertation and we were tales of coffee, either one, it's the same. And I was like, look at all these dirty quotes from like Darwin describing the orchid and the wasp. And you were like, this is disgusting. Anyway, I think that we were better off before the disciplines like broke apart. Like,
I don't know about better off in terms of the production of knowledge, but in terms of like joy, whimsy, and just general giving zero fucks, absolutely we're doing better. If we could like go back to that part without like reinscribing the misogyny, racism, homophobia, and all the other stuff that went along with that time period, that would be delightful. I think TikTok might be on its way to doing that, if I'm honest, because education TikTok is wild.
So we've resolved nothing because I'm not going to. I am not transitioning from Bridgerton to
education TikTok.
No, to TikTok. I call veto. No, that's not where the show's going. We might do a TikTok show, not today. That's not where this is going.
Way to like shut down the party, Mav.
I was interested in a moment. I'm just like, wait a minute. No, I don't.
No, we've just is this what the children call jumping the shark? Is this have we done it? Have we done it?
I think that we've gone on a journey tonight, and
we have gone on a journey. Yes.
And I think we could talk about a lot of important things in really smart ways, but also you would be surprised to know that I am not drunk at all. This is 100% sober.
Hey, having a lack of sleep can produce effects similar to being drunk is a thing I read last night. So
yeah.
It's also not healthy to not leave your house for 11 and a half months. So, you know.
Yeah, turns out a lot of things going on in our lives right now may or may not be contributing to some weird mental health effects.
Anyway, I mean, I learned a lot about plants. I'm going to leave in the point of the show where Sarah's like, "Oh, am I still on?" And everybody's like, "No, we're still listening." I mean, this is what you get when you watch a fascinating show like Bridgerton and then just listen to a great podcast like this one where we teach you stuff like how to kill people with plants. And
I will say I finally went back and listened to some of our old episodes from 2 years ago. I was like, "Whoa, I actually sound not stupid." And actually, we're having a really interesting conversation because famously, I've not listened to the show when I'm on because I don't like listening to myself. But,
it's weird.
Yeah,
it's
but
weird.
with some distance, like.
Yeah, if it's long enough ago, I can pretend it's a different person. It's okay.
Honestly, at that point, we might have been different people.
I mean, we were technically anyway.
Yeah, it was in the before times.
It was in the before times. I was younger. I was more naive. I didn't have more sleep. Anyway.
Thanks for coming, Sarah and Nicole.
Thank you so much for sitting through this.
And for giving us plant knowledge.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
I'm happy to share it. Happy birthday. Yeah, happy birthday.
Now we don't have to do another Bridgerton show for another year.
We'll see.
Yeah.
Don't pretend like you didn't love every minute of it.
I did. I enjoyed the show. I enjoyed doing this show, and I enjoy Bridgerton. And the less I have to think of topics, the better. And I have no idea what next week's show's on. So WandaVision. Is that next week? I don't think so.
Yeah,
it's next week.
No, we're recording it next week. Yeah, which means I need to pay for Disney Plus.
Okay.
It's WandaVision, and then we're into the brave future where no one knows.
Okay.
Where we're going.
To find out about what we're going to be talking about, subscribe to follow our blog.
Better get comment suggestions because we're clearly all losing our minds.
Yeah. We'll follow our blog at www.voxpopcast.com where you can find out hopefully about what we're talking about in next week. Well, definitely next week we'll have to write something up and give us your thoughts on WandaVision. And then the week after that, whatever we're going to be talking about, we'll figure it out. But in the meantime, Sarah, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, listen, if you want to learn how to kill a lot of people with plants, yeah, I know you like that. So I was actually looking through my blog, the old Sarah Sexy Plans blog, and somehow I lost the password to sign back into it. So that's why it's gone forever. But it also has all this weird spam. So like halfway through the article, there's like a thing about electric cars that I did not put there. But if you look at it, there's a lot of really good information about more things that you can do to do things with your period and plants. So that's super exciting. So I'm going to plug that. So it's sarahsexyplants.com.
We're going to have to figure out how to get you back in that. It was a good blog.
Show a close reading of her blog, including the spam. That's just a show.
Spam. Yes.
Nicole, what about you?
Oh, I will say, I think it's coming out. I think it's coming out later this year. The book on adapting Superman that John edited, and people like me and Anna and Mav have articles in.
Yeah. It's people will start noticing that it's like that book's out, and several of people that you've heard on this show are in it because that's how we book guests. People I work with other places.
Yep, we do.
Yeah, that's how we got Hannah, pretty much. So
yeah, and then later Mav just decided she was a co-host.
Yeah, good book. I'll be in it, I guess. I'm not sure when. I was last time I saw a draft. It's an interesting thing. Palindrome Hannah.
So first of all, I'd like to apologize for talking so much because I'm tired. And secondly, you should listen to Kesha's High Road because it's her birthday too.
Oh. And Katya.
You can find me on the interwebs, specifically the Instagrams at Just That Nerd Kid. Have I posted anything recently? No. Will I post anything in the near future? Jury's out.
You've posted a couple times. I've seen you post a couple times.
I've posted some stories which basically just involve like, look, here's an ocean. It's there. How nice. That's all the energy I have. Sewing hasn't really been happening other than like a speculative kind of way. And I'm mostly trying to figure out whether or not I would start posting on TikTok because I have joined TikTok. I know I've said in previous episodes that I wasn't going to join TikTok. I've joined TikTok. I'm not going to give you my username yet.
You might have more social media than I do at this point.
Yes. You can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, all of the places, always at Chris Maverick. You can follow the show on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, all the same places, always at Vox Popcast. And like I said, you can follow the show's blog at www.voxpopcast.com and find out what we're talking about next week. And you can subscribe to us on iTunes or Stitcher or Spotify or wherever the hell else you get podcasts from. And do us a favor if you enjoy the show, and we certainly hope you do. Otherwise, why did you sit through all of this? We lost our minds like 20 minutes ago. But please leave us a 5-star review, especially on iTunes. That helps other people find the show. And we didn't talk about eugenics being bad this week, but you could just talk about I don't know.
Eugenics is bad.
Yeah, how eugenics is bad and how this is the best show because it's the show you started listening to about superheroes, and now they're talking about Bridgerton and abortion tea. I don't know. It was interesting. You learned something. That's what you get from this show. You learn stuff. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube. YouTube is interesting now because now, in addition to our show, my other podcast is on our YouTube channel too. So you've got, a visual representation of our show, and you get to listen to Gosh Golly Wow, my other podcast with frequent guests of the show, Anna and Andrew. And it would really help us out if you subscribe to our YouTube channel. I would like to thank Maximilian of Thoughtform Music for our epic theme song, building ever so more epically and playing us out. I'd like to thank Nicole and Sarah for joining us. I'd like to thank you at home for listening, and we'll see you next time. Bye.